Well, problem 7.54. So we're now going to get into the technical details of standard costing, or at least part of it. These problems that we're working on now are introductory problems, so they're fairly small. They're trying to introduce a lot of the basic concepts and not go too much in depth. So we're going to work it like that. I'm going to do this in a similar way to what I would do in a face-to-face class. So typically what I do is walk you through this in two parts, have you do the third part, then I do the fourth part, and then you do the fifth part. What I'm going to do is do my part, the first three parts of it that I'll walk through and discuss. Then I'm actually not going to do the fourth part. I'll leave that to you to do. You can check your answer in the solutions manual, but you'll see me model the first sort of difficult intellectual part for one of the items, and then you need to go back and do it on your own for the second item. Then I'll come back and I will model the third item and have you come and on your own do it, the fourth item. So I will not actually do the second and the fourth item. It's in the solutions manual. You'll be able to do it yourself. Well, you'll be able to claw your way through it and figure it out. And if you practice it a few times, you'll be able to do it yourself. So here we go. It's problem 7.54. Take a look at the data. There is one problem. There's an error in the book text. And that error is that on the second line, allowance for waste in the table, it actually says, I think, 0.5% and 0.1%. The dot should not be there. It should be 5% and 10%. And if you look, the solutions manual is set up for 5% and 10%. So it's not 0.5% and 1%. It's 5% and 1%. Just a little typo in there. So, but like I said, the solution has worked out fine. So, want to go over a couple of things. When you're working with standard costing, in general, you're preparing an official document that will be circulated. It's an important document. It affects people's livelihood, their career. It affects efficiency, affects things that are bought or sold or done. So these are documents like any statement we do, a financial statement, so it has to have a proper heading. So the first thing you always have to do is read the instruction. And if it says prepare a standard cost card, that's like the magic textbook language saying you're doing the official document. Then before you do anything else, before you look at the numbers, start thinking about the setup. This kind of approach will help you in a lot of pieces of accounting, some more than others, but with standard costing and some of our more technical things, working on the setup first and independently will give you a big start and reduce your anxiety, and because it reduces the confusion level that is possible. So, So the first thing to do then is, before you start getting cognitively engaged with the problem and thinking about what the numbers are, what the analysis is, next thing you want to put down on the paper what you know just because you're a skilled accountant with some expertise, and you will know a lot. So that's actually the first round. The first two things I'm going to put down are things you can answer in a lot of standard cost problems before you get cognitively engaged, because as soon as you start looking at the facts, they're pretty absorbing because they're quite complex and they're going to fill your brain. So before you get to that point, put on the paper the things that you know about just based only on your expertise. So let's take a look. I have a little treat for myself here. I was talking to my brother in the Emirates. So he's an oil engineer and he works in RAK for the government, Ras Al Khaimah. And he asked me to look at one of my videos, and I showed it to him, and he said, "Paul, you really should put little lines on the board if you're going to do stuff." He also actually said, oh, I'm going to send you a couple of background shots so you can use them as background. And he said, you have to promise to use at least one of those. So like for the next 10 seconds, the background shot you see is one that my brother forced me to use. So it doesn't matter how old you get. Sometimes your brother can still push you around. Okay, so this one, on the other hand, was a good suggestion, the little lines in the paper. So the first thing you want to do, because they are points, if you're told do a standard cost card, this is an official document. It has to have a full title. Put that full title on there before you start messing around with facts. Make it small so you have enough space, but you want to put a title up there. You want to get the company name and the pieces that you actually know about. So it's Pest Control Incorporated Quick Kill Insecticide. This is the company. You have to identify the product. Okay? This is like saying a financial statement. Well, the standard cost card is for what product? Well, it's for the 5-gallon container of Quick Kill Insecticide. One little side notice here. All through this chapter and for the rest of the book, you're going to be using a mixture of imperial and metric measurements, and it really doesn't matter. They'll tell you to use gallons, pounds, whatever. You don't have to know anything about gallons or pounds, because always in standard costing, this isn't something for this class or for the book. In standard costing, we never converted units, even in the imperial system. Like, we didn't convert gallons to quarts. You never had to know any of that. We always used the decimal fraction of each measurement unit. So if you see pounds or gallons or whatever, the entire system does not function on converting pounds to ounces. It functions on decimal units of pounds. 0.3 pounds, 0.03 pounds, things like that. So there's no worry at all about using any foreign measurement, okay, because we always use decimal equivalents when we're doing that. So here we go. We have the name, and we also have to put the date, and we have to put the title of what we're doing, which is standard cost card. Or 2020. If the date is not given, just say for a relevant date or for the current date, 2020. A standard cost card is always for a year, remember, because it's really part of the budgeting and planning process. So it's the one that's in force for 2020, or it could be for 2020 and all subsequent years until we revise the standard cost card. So that goes first. Notice, you can do that without knowing anything else. You just have to look around and say, they want me to do a standard cost card. I have to identify the normal accounting things based on my expertise. I know this. Like, I don't have to look around and say, what should a title be? No, you know it has to be company name, has to be what you're measuring, has to define what the type of the statement is. So company name, 5-gallon quick kill standard cost card, and we also always need a date. So now square that away before you move on to get lost in other things you can get lost in. Okay. Now I'm going to put the typical layout down, because you should also do the layout prior to getting heavily involved. One, you should look and say, okay, what are they asking me to do? When I'm going to be doing inputs. Now, you may not know this the first time. When you watch this recording, you may not know this, but by the time you do a second problem, you'll know, standard cost card, I need to actually do a standard cost card of some of my factor inputs. So I need a column called inputs. Okay? And if I look around, I can see how many I have. Okay, in this case, you will say to yourself, with some experience, I have 2 kinds of direct material, and I have 2 departments that have labor. So the requirement is standard cost card lines for direct materials and direct labor. Okay, so I can do direct material, direct labor, always do the direct material first. And you have 2 types of each. So you have direct material, number 1, or A, I forget, what are we doing? A. And direct material, B. And you have direct labor, A, or you have direct labor department 1, direct labor department 2. Now, actually, what I'm doing while I'm talking, I'm putting these a little bit too close together for the way I need to lay this out. And also, it's too close together for working on an exam. So I want to come down here and say DMB, DL Department 1, and DL Department 2. Okay, notice because of the expertise you're building up, you're already starting to know what this is supposed to look like when you're done. Okay, that means that you can do this a lot quicker and more confidently, without worrying about what's going on. Now, just as a side note, what I'm going to do in class, or in this this lecture, I'm going to do direct material A, and then I'm going to do Department 1. Direct material B is done exactly like direct material A, so I want you to use this as a model, and then on your own, using the facts, you do the direct material B. And the same thing, I'm going to do the direct labor, and then direct labor for Department 2 is done exactly the same, and I'm not going to do it. You're going to do it. Of course, the answer is in the solutions manual, so you'll be able to check everything thoroughly. The solutions manual takes a slightly different approach to what I do, because in solutions manuals, they figure that they have to type everything, and especially when they're typing things and have the idea of transparencies in mind, doing formulas and equations is a little bit tricky, so that's laid out in a little bit more linear way in the solutions manual than you'll see me laid out. Then the next thing you need to do, okay, this is before you look at the numbers and do any of the analysis, is standard cost cards are always laid out the same way. It's always standard price times standard quantity equals standard cost. Okay. Then your expertise will also kick in, and you can fill in the units. Because notice, even this simple beginner problem, you're going to have a lot of different units floating around here, because you're going to have direct material and direct labor. And the direct material and the direct labor, direct material doesn't even have to be the same units. In this particular problem, it is. They're both in pounds. But this problem deliberately made simple so you can do a first one sort of, without going too crazy. In a lot of problems, you get direct material. Like there's another problem that I suggest you do, and it actually has 4 different types of direct material. Each type is measured in a different unit. So this can get to be pretty complicated. So we look at this, and there's something that you will know after you do your first problem and after you listen to me, and that is you actually know what the units are here. So when you do direct material A, the answer has to be a number, but it also has to be some units. Based on just your expertise, you can say, it's a standard cost, so it has to be in dollars, but it has to be dollars per what? Well, it's dollars per 5-gallon container of quick kill. This is, what your answer has to be. This is going to help you over here, because if you're going to multiply something by something else, and the answer is going to be dollars per 5-gallon container, notice that's going to help you lay this problem out. Because when you have a lot of stuff floating around, you're going to need a lot of help. Everyone does. This is the type of thing, even experts, even with a lot of experience, you still have to steady your brain and do this piece by piece, because there are too many things to comprehend in totality. You need some way, some technique to break it down piece by piece, so you're making decision by decision by decision, one at a time. So you can do this without looking at any facts, and actually you can almost do the next one and only look at one fact, because you have dollars per 5-gallon, and you know that this is standard price. So standard price has to be dollars per something. So you know that this is going to have to be dollars, right? So notice you're already, you're adding to what you have on the paper, meaning you're reducing the complexity or the number of questions you have to ask when you look at the data itself. So let's look and see, just a quick look. We're not getting into any deep analysis, but let's see if we can fill in a couple of more of these things, either this or this or this, before we get into the numeric analysis, to see if we understand the problem enough to know what the units are and what we're attempting to do. So if we read the facts that we have there, which would be, okay, we have direct material A, it's in pounds. Okay. Notice they're telling us you buy direct material A in terms of pounds. You buy 100 pounds or 1,000 pounds. They're telling you what this is. Okay. Now put on your algebra hat and say to yourself, okay, how can we multiply dollars per pound by something over here and have our answer be dollars per 5-gallon quick kill? We're going to have dollars here, so we can't cancel that out, but somehow we're going to have to cancel this out. We have to get rid of this pound before we get to our answer. So the way we would do that in algebra is it has to be in the numerator here. Okay? And then somehow we have to put in this denominator. Somehow over here we have to introduce the 5-gallon container of quick kill as one of our measurement units, and we have to get rid of the pounds. Okay, so that type of analysis you can get started on. One, if you see this down here, you know that it has to be the same thing up here, because that's the only way you can cancel it later and get rid of it, because you know it doesn't belong over here. Now, when I say you know that, I mean after you've worked one or two of these problems, you will know that. Right now, you know, if you have not worked a problem, you don't know that. You know, it seems, you know, sort of magical. I like magical stuff, you know. The one down here, it's going to be 5-gallon containers of quick kill. Huh? That's the only way this system works. Stop. Okay? If you don't get this, stop this lecture right now and just look at it and look at the logic here, because this has clipped off a huge amount of the confusion that can happen, because it's guiding you to the pieces you need to use in your numeric computation by looking at the setup itself and using your professional expertise of knowing what the result is supposed to look like. Okay? Just knowing what the answer is like and how it will look actually can help you solve it. So with a little bit more expertise, you'll know, okay, I can fill in a bunch of other stuff even at this point, because notice I'm going to have to do this 4 times in this problem. Every one of these has to be the same, because I'm doing the standard cost of a 5-gallon container of quick kill. It has to be the same standard cost. So this has to be dollars per 5-gallon. This has to be dollars per 5-gallon. And this also. Okay? So notice we're still not even doing any analysis yet. We're just building on your expertise to say, okay, this is what I already know with just a little bit of a look at the facts. If you know this for all of these, you can start filling in this, because this actually has to be the same for every single one. Huh? Now you can start poking around just a little bit. Don't look, still you don't go in depth, or you don't need to go in depth. Just say, okay, can I fill in a few more of these by looking for a few more facts? Let me look at direct material B. How do we buy that? Oh, this in pounds also in this case. So I can come back to here and I say, okay, this is the price. Our price is in dollars or whatever the local currency unit is. So actually direct material B is also dollars per pound. And what did I do? This one is written a little bit too low. So you know what? Even though my brother made me write the lines, he would be embarrassed if he saw that he made me write the lines to help you guys, and then I completely ignored them. Okay, if I look over here, and this is dollars per pound, and I have this, then this has to be pounds also. I'll look back and confirm. Do we buy direct material B by pounds? Oh yeah, we do that too. Okay, so now we can look at Department 1. We know that this actually the numerator has to be all in dollars. Okay? So I should have done it that way. I could have, another way to do this exercise I'm doing right now of just focusing on units is I could have put in this 5-gallon denominator all the way down at the first step just based on knowing what the title is. I could have put the dollar signs in all the way down just by knowing this is a standard cost card and we have to buy things as dollars per something. Then at the second layer of looking, what you're looking for is your dollars per watt, and it could be different in all cases. And then whatever you put here in the denominator here has to be the numerator here. Okay, so I could have even emphasized it more by, putting them all dollars down just at the very first second, because you would know that after you've done a few of these. So let's look around and say, okay, how do we buy direct labor here? In fact, they are actual employees, so we are going to do this by direct labor hour. Notice I fill in both of them because I know the denominator here has to be the numerator here. Boom. Okay. If you start off with this, then going to the next step is a lot easier because this will guide you into asking certain questions that you want to ask. Now, still not totally easy because we have that idea, remember, of the realization rate. But in standard costing, especially here, we have to build in an error rate. And here it can get complex because of our purchasing pattern. Okay? So we still can't, usually it's not, you don't just find a number for either of these, you still have to do some analysis. But by setting this up, it's guiding you in. Also, notice you're always doing something that's under your control. So, because really face it, when you go into an exam, what happens to your intelligence? Is it like higher than it normally is or lower? Well, mainly lower. Almost every time you take an exam, you're going to perform worse on that exam than you would have performed in a regular situation. Why? Just think about it. Lack of sleep, stress, bad eating habits, like whatever. Right before an exam, especially if it's an important one, you do things, all of us do things that are a bit counterproductive, that actually lower our thinking capacity just a little bit. So this is, if setting this up, once you have some expertise, you can set this up, and that reduces the cognitive load on you because you're starting to do things step by step by step instead of trying to imagine the whole giant mess at once, which, really, it's next to impossible. But you would try. Okay, so now we have this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the computations for this and this. This computation is easy. You just multiply across. Then I'm not in the class. In a face-to-face class, I would then stop the class and have you guys do the B part on your own, and I'd walk around for 10 minutes while you do that. I'm not going to do that in this case. I'm going to just not do it and let you do it. Then you can compare your answer. Okay, so that's the work you need to do. And you need to do this pretty soon, like right after watching me do this. Because you need to, you're seeing me generate the general approach. You need to stress your brain out a little bit right then. And I'll do the same thing for this one. So I'll do the direct labor for Department 1 myself, and then I'm not going to do the second one. But in the face-to-face class, that's when I would stop and walk around and say, okay, you guys do it. And I would go around and, watch you do it. And some of you would just refuse to do it. And you'd sit there and I would hound you mercilessly, and give you a hard time until you actually picked up your pen or pencil and worked on it. So we'll do that. So I'm going to do this one as a model, then you do that one on your own. I'll do this one as a model, you do that one on your own, and you have the solution in the solutions manual to check. So here we go. Let's take a look at this. On an exam, you can do this right here. Okay, notice I talked about leaving a little space. On an exam, you can do your scratch work right here if you want. In some cases, there's enough space. Or you can do your scratch work off to the side and then post your answer here, but your scratch work needs to be fully documented. Okay? If I looked and say, if you have the number 12 here, I have to see where you got it, and the units have to be correctly identified, even if it's like down into some sort of scratch area. Scratch meaning, a work area.